Hello, everyone, and welcome to Franz's Real Estate Facts, episode 22. I actually said that last week was episode 22, but it's actually episode 21. So I guess that means that I have enough episodes now that I am not sure what episode number we're at. So that means maybe math, not the best thing for me to do right now if basic counting isn't working. But I just closed the deal with a VA buyer and they'd put in offers. And, San Diego is a military town, as I'm sure everybody knows. And not only is it a military town, because it's a military town, there's a lot of VA loans around. And even though there are a ton of VA loans in the city of San Diego and, the county of San Diego, I still find that some listing agents and particularly sellers, when I talk to sellers, they are afraid of VA loans. And so I thought I would bring in an excellent and awesome person, Lori Goldman, to come and talk to us about why we shouldn't be afraid of VA loans. And Lori works with Movement Mortgage, which does a ton of VA loans. She does a ton of VA loans. If I recall correctly, you may have been founded by veterans or something along those lines.
We're definitely a very military-based company in terms of we really target the military market. We do a lot of incentives for military buyers. So
Yeah.
our lenders are not veterans, but we are definitely veteran oriented.
Right. So because of that, you do a ton of VA loans, and you can certainly talk to us about why you shouldn't be afraid of VA loans, right? So, if you see a VA offer and it's the best offer, there's a decent amount of money in it, like people might still be afraid of it. So why are people afraid of VA loans on the one hand, and why shouldn't they be like, I don't think VA loans are scary, but like,
yeah,
help calm everybody else down for us.
Okay, well, speaking as an old person, because I've been in this business now, I'm going on my 34th year. I should have covered my mouth with that. There is a huge stigma in our industry with VA buyers because for many, many, many years, when the program was first initiated way back when, it was a requirement of sellers to pay a lot of closing costs on behalf of the veteran buyer. And that meant coming up with a lot of extra money as a seller, where you would not necessarily have to come up with that expense if you were selling to a non-veteran buyer. And that is a really age-old negative stigma attached to selling your home to a VA buyer, to a veteran. That whole line of thinking and that whole practice of requiring the seller to pay the veterans buyers has been long gone for, I don't even know how many years, but it's been at least 10, maybe even 15 years. But that stigma is very much alive in the real estate community and in the homeowner community, because the homeowner is not necessarily selling their house every single day like you and I are, or involved in real estate transactions. So they just heard, maybe from their uncle or their grandfather or their father, or just heard it once and it's stuck in their brain. If I sell my house VA, it's going to cost me way more money. So no, I'm just not going to entertain veteran buyers. And it's still in the minds of a lot of real estate agents and real estate companies that don't necessarily study the rules or the cost structures, or they're not aware of what the modern day policy is in terms of expenses for selling. They just may not be aware. They have so much other stuff going on their plate that they have to keep attuned with their license and their disclosure and everything else, and they just may not know. So I do actually hear that from real estate agents from time to time, like, oh, if my seller sells VA, they have to pay a bunch of closing costs, don't they? And I'm like, no, they don't. There's no additional fees whatsoever to sell to a veteran buyer, period, end of story. So that's probably the biggest stigma that I've come across, and again, because when I started in the business 30 something years ago, that was the mandate. The seller had to pay the entire escrow fee. The seller had to pay all the lender fees. The seller had to pay the discount points for the veteran buyer. And it literally was thousands of dollars. It
Right.
could have been $3 or $4 or $5,000. There was not choices of discount points that you could pay it with. There was one choice, whatever the one rate was and whatever the cost was for that rate, and the seller had to pay it. So it was very, very different. And that was just, 30 some odd years ago. And it did not change until several years ago. So
Right.
that's the biggest misnomer. Seller incurs no extra expense whatsoever now to sell to a veteran buyer. That's a big one.
Which is great. Now that means sellers get to keep their money, and um, you know, they can sell to a veteran. And
Right.
we all love our veterans because
Exactly.
they are amazing and awesome people. And they do, I mean, I have friends who are veterans, I know a lot of veterans, and they do make a lot of sacrifices for us, and we are appreciative of that.
Exactly. I mean, what better way to honor those who have served our country, than to help them in that first step or next step of home ownership? You know,
Exactly.
it's just such a great way to honor the people that served our country. Um, in addition, our company, and I think there's other companies that follow suit, we don't have any lender fees whatsoever for veteran buyers. So the fees that we do charge on civilian and or conventional and FHA loans, that's completely waived for veteran buyers. So, all the more reason it's a better transaction for the veteran buyer, but it's also no additional cost for the seller as well.
Right. So the first thing obviously is, okay, there's no additional cost for the seller. As a practical matter, the veteran can take on whatever costs need to be taken on. But there's also this idea of a VA appraisal, and VA appraisals are just like, I hear people being like so afraid of VA appraisals, and they say, oh, well, it's a VA appraisal and what's going to happen with that and all that sort of thing.
Right.
So what do VA appraisers mostly care about? And as either a listing agent, because I do like to prep when I'm, working with a seller, I tend to prep them and I say, look, if you want to put your house in the best position to sell it, you don't have to like remodel the kitchen for $20,000, but maybe some of these things you need to address because they will probably be an issue for an appraiser. So what are the issues or things that sellers should know about so they can accept a VA offer?
And your key statement that just there was these things may be an issue for an appraiser, and that's across the board. That's on a conventional appraiser, an FHA appraiser, a VA appraiser. A VA appraiser is no more particular about items going on in your home than any other appraiser. I mean, basically, appraisers are out looking at, number one, does the house um, comp out in terms of value based on what other homes have sold and closed for, similar to that model. So they're looking for model matches, bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, proximity to other attributes, condition of the home. So a VA appraisal really is no different than a conventional appraisal. It's just the luck of the draw, whoever the individual is that's going out to do the appraisal, and the comps that are available in the market, what have other homes sold and closed for. Appraisers right now really have the hardest job of all of us because they're trying to make sense of what this home has sold for. And right now in the market, most homes are selling for more today than they were yesterday and the day before. So the comps is really the most challenging part. But what the appraisers are really looking for is that the property meets health and safety guidelines for a new occupant coming in. So any type of health and safety violations is going to be a concern for a VA appraiser or a conventional appraiser or an FHA appraiser. So do you want me to go into some examples of things that they're looking at visually?
Oh yeah, sure. That could be really helpful because if they can see it, you can see it as a homeowner
Exactly.
or a listing agent.
Yeah, so some of the things that, and I always tell people, because I get calls like this all the time from agents, well, this house has this and this house has that. And I tell them that, first of all, the appraiser is not a licensed contractor. So they're not going to be inspecting the home like a licensed contractor would. I think if you ever have concerns, you would want to maybe consult with a home inspector and say, okay, what's going on
Right.
in the house here? But they're like you and I, they're going to walk through the property and they're going to visually eyeball the property. So if you can look up at your ceilings and you see water stains, any appraiser is going to call that out. Like, what's going on with the water stains on the ceiling? You know, is there possibly some kind of a leak? And then they'll note that in the appraisal. So best to mitigate that before an appraiser comes out to a property, no matter the type of transaction, find out what's going on. Is there a leak? Repair it. You know, deal with that obvious marker before an appraiser comes out to the property. They're going to be looking at health and safety issues. If a window is broken in the home, that is a health and safety issue. So you definitely can count on that being called for in an appraisal, or you can be proactive and get that fixed prior to an appraisal. Other things are going to be like missing fixtures. So if you've got a bathroom that's missing a sink or missing fixtures, or a shower where there's no shower head, you know, just really common sense kind of things. But, you know, again, a lot of homeowners don't realize, you know, oh, I was going to fix that and I never got around to it. Well, an appraiser is going to call that out.
Right.
Floor coverings, if the house has no floor coverings, that could be, if it's a health and safety issue, if there's nails sticking up from, you know, boards on the floor, or somebody can cut their foot. And then the other thing I think that is something that people may not be aware of, houses built prior to 1978, or, you know, older homes, if there's chipping and peeling paint
Right.
inside the house, because of the fact that there was lead-based paint, you know, prior to 1978, if there's chipping and peeling paint, they are going to request that that be sanded and repainted with a non-lead-based paint, because of the fact that a home buyer, you know, regardless of their habits, or primarily for children, if they come into the home and a little kid, you know, scrapes that paint and puts it in their mouth, they could eat it and get sick. So that's a health and safety concern, and they're going to want that mitigated prior to the new buyer taking possession of the property. So just anything that you can walk through your house and see with your own eyes that is a health and safety concern, that's going to be something that's called for in an appraisal, and in any kind of an appraisal.
Right. And honestly, I mean, one of the things that I see is, you know, a lot of um, buyers now, they're required, or listing agents, and I mean, as a listing agent, I have absolutely done this where I say, okay, no appraisal, we don't want an appraisal contingency. And I'm very grateful if I find a buyer's agent who is willing to throw their client under the bus that way. But but when I represent a buyer, that's really not something that I'm willing to do unless, you know, the buyer is either fully coming in with cash, or the buyer really understands what they're getting into. So if you've got a first-time home buyer or a VA buyer, or, you know, the appraiser is trying to protect the buyer.
Right.
And it's really important for listing agents to understand that. And the other thing is, as a lawyer, I mean, also an attorney, I'm a real property attorney. And one of the things that I will say is, you know, when something goes wrong, like, it's all well and good for you to ask people to waive a bunch of contingencies when you know, when they open escrow. But the fact of the matter is, you are basically, by forcing the person to waive that contingency, you are increasing your risk that they are going to go after you and say, you intentionally screwed me over. And litigation in real estate is extremely expensive. Like, even if you win, it's very expensive. So you know, a smart listing agent really might be smart to say, yeah, maybe we'll leave this contingency in place so that we'll allow the people to themselves shoulder the burden of a screw up, right? That really is very important. As a lawyer, part of what I do is I just like shift risk around, right? And so I make sure that the right person has the right risk.
Yeah. Yeah. And one other item to be aware of on a VA transaction, if you want to discuss real quickly the termite.
Oh, yes.
So the one requirement on VA transactions is that Veterans Administration does require termite report and clearance. But again, that does not have to be paid for by the seller. So that's something that can be negotiated in the contract. It is a unique requirement. Other transactions don't necessarily require the termite report and clearance. It's up to the buyer whether or not they want to ask for it or request it. It's negotiated in the contract. In VA, it is absolutely required by the Veterans Administration to have a termite report and a clearance. However, if the seller is not willing or does not want to provide that, it is allowable in VA for the buyer to pay for the termite report and the repairs, as long as they can show that they have the ability and the funds necessary to pay for those items. So again, not a burden to the seller. If they want to negotiate that out in terms of the financial responsibility, they can put that back on the buyer if they feel like they absolutely have to. And then
Right.
speak to the liability of that too as a seller,
Well, I mean, that's just the seller, that's a negotiated element, right? So you just negotiate that. It's really, you know, if you're shifting costs around, then you're just shifting costs around, and it's just one person pays for it versus another person paying for it. But when you're really shifting liability, you're shifting the burden of the responsibility of a decision. So it's like if you have no inspection contingency, then the buyer can get an inspection, right? But then maybe because there's no contingency, they'll say, well, you intentionally didn't disclose this because you knew that it wasn't going to be known. And then, yeah. And really, as I like to, I mean, I'm not a litigator, I don't litigate things, but my litigator friends say all the time, if you litigate, both people lose and the winners are the lawyers. And it's so true.
Yeah.
So true.
It's a whole nother rabbit hole, huh?
It's a whole nother rabbit hole. So yeah, so it sounds like VA loans are really not something that people need to be particularly afraid of. And it also sounds like there's no additional costs associated with getting a VA loan. It's just that sometimes veterans themselves or people who are getting VA loans, they might not have the funds available to cover certain costs. And so then, they will ask that the seller get those or, take on those costs. But the flip side of it is any buyer might not have enough money and ask the seller to shoulder a certain number of costs.
Exactly. And
Um,
if that is the situation too, depending upon the price of the home and the comps and the appraisal, risk, that can be negotiated into the price of the home if the house can support that in its comps and its appraised value. That's something that does still happen even in this marketplace. So if there's room in the value of the home and there's room in the appraisal, the seller can assist that veteran purchaser by agreeing to pay some closing costs and just factoring it into the price of the home.
right. And, unless you're really, really squeezing your home for every single penny that it can get, which frankly, most sellers aren't, there's usually a little bit of room to go up by like a certain amount of money. And the other thing is on the appraisal report, the actual concessions do show up on the appraisal. So if you're getting like a $10,000 or $15,000 concession, the appraiser will kind of factor that into how they're comping out the property.
Yeah. Yeah, and it
So
could be anything. It could be, 1,000 or 2,000 to 5,000 to 10,000. Doesn't necessarily. It's all, everything's negotiable, and every single transaction is going to be completely different. So you just got to find your sweet spot in your transaction and see if you can make that work. But
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really the most important piece, which is negotiate, get a good agent, make sure that your agent is able to, especially on the listing side, that your agent is able to negotiate sort of a good deal and understands where are there holes in the contract, where are there potential issues in the contract, and where is the contract sort of in your favor so that you don't end up with issues that you don't want to have.
Absolutely. And then make sure your buyer is completely approved and not just qualified or, with a verbal conversation, but actually pen and paper, underwriter reviewed, approved, ready to go.
Yes, that is extremely important because then, should you waive the loan contingency? Maybe not. but nonetheless, you have a little bit more assurance that the loan will properly go through as a seller or as a listing agent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for that information.
Absolutely.
Do you have any other tips for sellers who are selling to veterans?
Just keep an open mind and an open heart, because that's such an integral part of our society, especially here in San Diego. Um,
Absolutely.
and it's a great way to give back to the community by welcoming veterans, as they do get shut out quite a bit, and it's really disheartening. So don't do that. Don't do
Yeah.
that to our veterans. um,
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would. I so first of all, I probably need to check on this, but veteran status, I believe, is actually a protected class in the state of California. So if they are a protected class, which I will confirm or deny next week, but if you actually are discriminating against somebody because of their veteran status, that is a problem. So if there's any proof that you discriminated against them because of their veteran status, you could be in trouble, and that's a bad thing.
I do have one thing to add. If you are a condo owner, you may or may not have the ability to sell to a veteran, because condominium properties do require approval from the Veterans Administration, and that's the homeowners associations. So it is a little bit of a different game if you are a condominium owner. The condo complex itself, whoever the HOA is, must be on the VA's approved list. There are a large majority of condos in San Diego that are on the VA approved list, but that's something that you and your realtor would need to vet before you go on the market. And
Yeah,
if he knows how to get a hold of me, I can check that in 15 seconds online.
right.
The Veterans Administration has a master approved list of the condo projects. They aren't always listed by project name. So that's why you want to have somebody like myself check that. But yeah, they have to be on the approved VA list in order to accept VA financing or VA buyer on that particular property. Planned unit developments, a single family home in a association, a master association, like a planned unit PUD, those do not have to be VA approved. But if it's a true condo or townhome, which townhome is just another description of a condominium association, we do need to check and make sure that it's on the VA approved list prior to accepting a VA offer. And that's something you want to know before you put your property on the market, so that you're advertising it correctly.
Yeah, exactly. So plan. I don't really know how to explain this plan. People think that mortgage lenders are only for buyers. They are not. They are for sellers as well. They provide a wealth of information. I had I had a listing somewhere, and it was out of this county, and I talked to a lender in that county before putting the property on the market. I had the lender actually go out to the property, look at it, and say, what are the potential issues for this property? Is it financeable? What are the ways that it can be financed? So that when we actually did get offers, I had a lot of options and we were able to close when 6 other agents said that that property could not be financed.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
A little
Anyway,
homework, a little paperwork, a little homework.
yes, planning is so important.
Yeah.
Um, so those were really great tips. So just to like recap for anybody who kind of tuned out a little bit as we were chatting, number one, health and safety is really important. So make sure that there are no health and safety issues, and health and safety issues are going to be a problem for any appraiser. They're going to call it out for any type of appraisal. Um, the second thing is condos. If you have a condo, like a traditional condo in a high rise or something like that, it needs to be VA approved if you're going to go through VA. And also FHA approved if you go through FHA. And if you get a conventional loan, then you actually do need to have, there's other processes. So any type of condo financing, there are requirements for lenders. Um, and the last thing is it does not cost more money to sell to a veteran. So that's really important to know. And if you've got a veteran who's got a ton of money and they can pay for everything themselves, you are not going to have to pay any money as a seller. So that is very helpful to know. And the last thing that I will say is if you have been watching, and if anybody has been watching and they think that you are as awesome as I think you are, how can they get a hold of you?
Oh, me, you're talking to me. Yeah,
Yes.
so I am on Facebook. It's Lori, Lori, Goldman, Goldman. And my phone number, so anyway, on Facebook, you can reach me on my business page. It's Lori Goldman um, Mortgage Loans. I think if you just search that, you'll find me. I've got a business page on Facebook. You can also Google me. I've got a Google page, Lori Goldman, loan officer. And I'm with Movement Mortgage. We are in the top 10 purchase money lenders nationwide. Movement is solely mortgages. We don't do anything else, but we are a very large nationwide lender. And my phone number, I should have my sign up here, 619-885-0093, 619-885-0093. But if you search in Facebook, Lori Goldman, Lori, and then Goldman, you'll find my business page and all my contact info is on there. Or in Google.
Excellent. That's awesome. Well, Lori, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your taking the time. I know that mortgage lenders right now are absolutely slammed. And so you taking the time and talking to me and us is extremely, extremely valuable. And I am extremely appreciative of that. So
Absolutely.
thank you so, so, so much.
You're so welcome.
And yes, and I will see you all next week with another really awesome guest who will give another interesting real estate fact.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.